Hello, my friend. You're listening to the Sort Yourself Out podcast. This week, we're discussing how we can seize the opportunities inherent in the present world crisis. We'll be looking at the bigger picture of what's going on the inner side of life, as well as the role that we are each playing within it. So stay tuned. I'm your host, Janine Hunt, natural health therapist for over 30 years, hypnotherapist, lifelong student, and spiritual seeker. I like to seek out the most effective practices and techniques that provide the greatest bang for my buck and the fastest route to freedom from whatever is holding us back. I can't wait to share with you these powerful techniques so that you too can sort yourself out, know deeper meaning in your life, and best of all, a sense of inner peace. So let's get started. Well, hello there, and thank you so much for joining me today. I think you will probably agree with me that the world is in a weird place. We are living in unprecedented times. And over the last few months of lockdown and world fear and hysterical, relentless media reporting about nothing but the coronavirus, I have gone through the emotional spectrum. One day I'm okay and feeling fairly positive, and then the next I'm bummed out and disheartened. Sometimes this is happening within the day as well. Bummed, disheartened, okay, positive, bummed, disheartened, okay, positive. And it just seems to carry on relentlessly. And usually it has to do with what I'm seeing on the news and the various videos I've been watching. Now, these sources of information have massive influence over the thoughts and feelings and mind of mankind. So, if we look at the outer events of what's going on, it's all a giant cluster, you know what. Hey, it's a cluster, you know what. And most of us would throw our hands up in the air and say, oh, what can I possibly do? It all looks so hopeless and messed up. It's like polishing a turd, right? Sorry for that gross reference, but you know what I mean. So this week, I want to look at this world crisis from an inner angle, from a more spiritual point of view, so that we can step back, take a longer view of events, and hopefully get some fresh insight into what is going on in the world today. And then, with that fresh insight, empower ourselves to take some positive actions that can propel us forward into a more beautiful world that many of us know is possible and that we as a race so deeply desire. So, to begin with, I want to look at how we got where we are in this crisis. Now, remember, we are looking at the inner causes that are producing outward effects. This is always the way it is. You know that idea that you create your own reality. You've probably heard that before. Well, how do we do that? How is it that we create our own reality? We do that via the thoughts and the emotions that we energize and obsess over. These vitalized thoughts have power. Energy follows thought. That is a spiritual law. Energy follows thought. And anything that has ever appeared on the physical plane is a product of thought energy, of the imagination, of picturing something, of making images in the mind and looking at something from all angles and just imagining it over and over again. And as someone does that, the energy is stepped down from the mental and emotional levels to the dense physical world. I don't know if you listened to my last couple of podcasts, but this is something I talk about fairly frequently. But in the last couple of weeks, when I was talking about who are we and why are we here, I mentioned my favorite quotation, which is, "Matter is spirit at its lowest point of manifestation, and spirit is matter at its highest." And how that tells us that there is a continuum of spirit and matter. So the continuum has two poles with, say, spirit at the top and matter at the bottom. And so somewhere in the middle of that is thought energy. Everything is energy, but energy has substance, whether it's on the spirit end of the continuum or on the matter end of the continuum. On the matter end, it's dense, hard, physical energy. It's something that's tangible. The energy has crystallized into physical form. And higher up the continuum, it's subtle energy. It still has substance, however, okay? Everything has substance, but it's a matter of degree. And so when we are energizing these thoughts, we are empowering them, we're feeding them, we're nourishing them. And these kinds of thoughts and emotions are much more likely to manifest in the physical reality. If we have just a fleeting thought or a passing emotion, then that's not really going to do anything in terms of manifesting on the physical plane. That might ruffle our feathers briefly, but it doesn't really possess any power. What we need to be concerned with are the thoughts and emotions that we are continually feeding, because those are the ones that will manifest in the physical reality. So check out this quote from the Tibetan who wrote the Ageless Wisdom books with Alice Bailey. Here's a quote. "The tendencies of human desire and thought are not at this time of the highest order, and the vast assembly of insects which now haunt our planet and cause increasing concern to the scientist, agriculturist, and all those dealing with the welfare of the human animal are the direct result of thought precipitation." Wow. Our thoughts are responsible for the huge amounts of insects that we have on the planet these days that are causing trouble in so many areas of life. Okay, here's another one. Another quotation from the Tibetan. "Men should remember that through the power of their thoughts and their spoken words, they definitely produce effects upon other human beings functioning on the three planes of human evolution and upon the entire animal kingdom. The separative and maleficent thoughts of man are largely responsible for the savage nature of wild beasts and the destructive quality of some of nature's processes, including certain phenomena such as plague and famine." So, we're all familiar with how you have an argument with someone in your household. Say you have a big fight with your partner, and that creates an atmosphere in the home. We can all relate to that one, right? You can feel it. Even if they're not there anymore in the room, there's a lingering tension, and it tends to hang about until you resolve the issue and kind of get rid of it from your energy system as well. So this isn't just all BS. We can see how it happens on a small scale in our own lives. You can tell when you meet up with someone and they're in a crappy mood. They don't even need to tell you that there's something wrong, but you sense it, you pick it up, and you notice the vibe. Like we're very good at picking up people's vibes. So I know it sounds really odd, like that our massed thought is creating plagues of insects, that it's creating famine. But there's something else as well. In the Seth books by Jane Roberts, Seth tells us that mass human thought currents are responsible for violent weather eruptions as well, like earthquakes and tsunamis and storms, as well as epidemics. So we always think that the weather affects our moods, but really it's our moods creating the weather. And if you think about that atmosphere that can hang around in a home after there's been a big disruption or a big argument, this kind of thing is happening on a global scale with the collective thought energy of humanity. And so this current viral plague that we've got going on in the world today with coronavirus is also related to this psychic polluted thinking, which the planetary etheric web can no longer contain. We're just filling it up. And unfortunately, through what's happening now, we're filling it up even more. We're creating a whole lot more angst and fear and worry to add to what has already caused the problem. So I hope you understand what I'm saying about this. Like, it doesn't just sound too airy-fairy, but just remember that vibe that you feel from someone who's in a foul mood, or that tension in the atmosphere of your home. So this is also happening on a grand scale, and we're all contributing to it. Another thing to think about, we also know how hanging on to resentment and fear and hatred and blame and bitterness and worries, all these sort of negative, highly charged emotions can create illness in the body. Now, what happens is that when we're hanging on to these and continually feeding these and charging anew these negative emotions, they create energetic blockages and short circuits in our energy system. And that then creates illness in the physical body. Now, I've spoken about this before. We have an energy body. It's called the etheric body, that is the counterpart. It's a counterpart of the physical body, but it is actually the blueprint. It's the energetic blueprint of the physical body. And it lies behind the physical body. And as I said, it's the blueprint. So it comes first. So anything that is going to manifest as an illness in the body appears first within the etheric body at an energetic level. And it'll be a blockage in one of our energy centers, most likely. I mean, we have masses of energy centers. We know the main ones as the chakras, but there are a whole bunch of minor ones and energy pathways where blockages can occur as well. But these blockages and short circuits always appear first in the etheric body before they manifest in the physical body. Except, of course, in the case of accidents. We can have accidents that occur to our physical body, and this is a situation where it doesn't occur first in the energy body because, accidents are just sort of bam, it happens and it's done. But most of, especially when it comes to emotions, we are feeding them for years and years, sometimes whole lifetimes. We are nourishing these painful emotions that do us no good and that can eventually create illness in the body. These malignant thought patterns, malignant emotions. So imagine the effects when all of humanity is pumping its emotional and mental angst out into the atmosphere. On one level, it's just kind of creepy and gross. But when you think about it that way, plagues and pandemics don't sound nearly as fruity and as airy-fairy, being caused by our thoughts and emotions. Because we already see it happening in a microcosmic way in our own lives. In the book Glamour, A World Problem, we read that when the hierarchy looks at humanity, it appears to be walking in a deep and constantly changing density of currents, which hide and distort and which swirl around human beings and prevent their seeing the light as it is. Now, I find this quite interesting. There are spiritual beings on the higher planes that are guiding humanity, just as we humans are meant to be guiding the three subkingdoms of nature, the animal, vegetable, and mineral. So we too have our guides. I find that really interesting to think about how they see us walking around in this dense, mushy fog, these energy currents that are just distorting and hiding the light that there is. We are living in, I'd say, quite dark times now. It's pretty disturbing what's going on in the world. And it would be really, really easy just to focus on all of the darkness. When that happens, we become incapable of seeing the light. The darkness just kind of snuffs it out like a candle. So not only are we indulging in the dark thoughts and contributing to them, to the collective thought pool, but we become incapable of seeing the light. It's like a double whammy of darkness. So I think this is really some food for thought. Our human consciousness either enlightens, beautifies, and harmonizes the natural world, or it darkens and spoils and produces conflict within it. So before I bum you out totally, I want to look at some of the positive things going on in the world today as a result of this crisis, because it's not all bad. We've all heard the stories about the dolphins returning to the canals of Venice, and the clean air, the certain parts of the world can be seen by satellite properly now that couldn't before. There are a lot of things going on. The natural world especially is getting a chance to renew itself and to take a deep breath as we humans are taking a break from our normal activity. And that's another way that, this is another positive thing here. Humans, so many millions of people throughout this conflict have been released from the daily grind of their work. We've all been told to stay at home or to work from home, or the businesses we work at have closed down temporarily. So there's been a lot of change going on in the world, and millions of people are now getting an opportunity to rethink. I know a lot of people are really rather enjoying this crisis. They're not enjoying the death and the fear and the economy as we know it going down the pan, but they are loving having an interlude to reflect and consider what they really want for themselves and the world. They're getting a break from maybe a job that they just don't like, and it's a time where people can rethink what's going on, what they want, where they're going, what matters, what their values are, and, move forward in a different direction. Another interesting thing, and this to me is a whopper. Humanity has come together as a whole in this crisis. You know, we're all fighting the common enemy, and this time we're not fighting other humans. Probably the last time something happened on a grand scale was groups of nations coming together in the Second World War. But then we were killing each other, and it was still humanity pitted against humanity. And, you know, on one level it was coming together, and there was a common cause, and it was a war that needed to be fought. But this is different. We are now coming together to fight a virus. And this is unprecedented in human history, this level of people making sacrifices and people being concerned for the common good. There's just an unprecedented level of goodwill and so many demonstrations of compassion and unity and love taking place all over the world. Now, this is the outer reflection of our inner interconnectedness. And we're seeing here that humanity, even though it's on the outer side of things, it is reflecting the oneness that connects us all on the inner levels. So I think that that is a really interesting outcome of what we're all going through in the world right now. You know how everything has a silver lining? Well, this is a quite important one, I think, of what we're all living through at the moment. So, another thing we've seen, and this is a doozy as well, we have seen that national health care can be provided practically overnight if there is the will. You know, there are countries in the world that do not have any national health coverage where people are looked after without basically needing to sell their soul to pay for it. And suddenly, bam, it can be done. I find that quite interesting. You know, it's the governments want to, they can do it. Another thing that we've seen is many governments providing people with a living wage. And this is just another one of those things where whole systems can be developed or changed in an instant, and it doesn't need to take hundreds of years to force through change. Things can change practically overnight. And in the Alice Bailey books, the Tibetan tells us, I can't remember which book it's in, but I know I've read it, that there are enough resources in the world to support everyone if put to proper use and if they are shared equitably. Now, I don't think he means, you know, that we should be using the resources the way we are now, like so much of our energy, we're talking about like the physical resources of the planet, but also the resources of human ingenuity that go into creating bloody weapons and war machines and like billions and billions of dollars. And, you know, if I look around and ask pretty much anyone I know or meet if this is something that they think is important and that they want in the world and that they want our governments to be concentrating on, they're going to say no. You know, we just don't want it. So if money and the world's resources, the physical resources in the world, are put to proper use and shared, there is enough to go around, even for our huge population today, because the world is abundant. And if we don't squander it, and if we're not overly materialistic, and if we humans have our right focus, and that, you know, that may mean an adjustment of behavior, for sure, it's going to. We can't be consuming in the same way we do now, probably, and creating the landfill and the garbage and the mess we're creating now, and have enough resources. But if we change things, and as we've seen, change can happen overnight, it can take place in an instant, then there's enough to go around. And so countries could provide a living wage for all people. And the Tibetans said that this would then free us up to be creative and to cultivate the skills and talents, the actual qualities of our soul that we're meant to anchor in the world, where we can do what we're actually meant to do, which is to bring our soul's skills, talents, qualities, capacities. We're meant to cultivate them and then share them for the good of the world. And so if we all had a basic living wage that covered our basic needs for survival, we weren't all scrabbling around needing to earn money just to put food on the table and a roof over the heads and clothes on our back, if those main things could be taken care of, then humanity would have so much time to pour into the things that really matter. We could do this today. I still look back at what Bob Geldof was doing in the mid-'80s, where he was trying to abolish that famine that was taking place in Ethiopia. And we still haven't done it. I just can't believe it. So if we had a living wage, we could then dedicate our time to replacing the soul-destroying work that so many of us do these days, the 9-to-5 grind that we don't enjoy and that we dread. And we could be replacing it with our soul-enhancing and soul-inspired work that is actually going to benefit the world and move forward our evolution. So there's the situation of, well, who would do all the work to keep the world's infrastructure running? Well, plenty of people would still want to get out of the house and go to work for extra money. Not everyone's going to want to just stay at home. And so I had an amusing idea that, if this were the case, if we had this living wage, and there probably wouldn't be tons of people who would want to go and do the jobs that are considered to be pretty unpleasant by most of us, like being a sewer cleaner. Lots of people aren't going to be busting down the door to get into that job interview, right? But maybe jobs like that, they might become the most highly paid jobs going as an incentive to get people to do the work. I don't know, just kind of amused me to think of it like that. We would for sure need people to keep the world running, but there will always be people, there's horses for courses. There are all sorts of people who have different interests, and they like, what you like, I don't necessarily like. And so I think between the 7.5 billion of us, we could probably manage it and keep the place going. We also have other energies at work in the world. It's not just our thought energies. We're also in a phase of transition as we are coming out of 2,000 years of the Piscean era. And this period of time was characterized by an authoritarian and paternalistic and patriarchal, do what you're told approach. And we now are moving into the Aquarian age. And this age is conditioned by rather different energies. These are the energies of brotherhood and teamwork and sharing and inclusiveness. So we have a bit of a conflict going on in which the old ways are crumbling. But the vested interests who've held sway for the past 2,000 years, and these energies carry on, even though the individual people die from an incarnation, these energies are still being nourished across the period of time. So the vested interests that have held sway and who have created the systems are clinging on for dear life to keep these old decaying systems going, okay? It's their vested interest. They built it, they want to keep it going. The problem is that these are now limitations to humanity's expanding consciousness and evolution. But the vested interests are digging in and they're giving it all they've got to retain their power over us and to keep us chained to their old ways. Another aspect of the new incoming Aquarian energies is that these are energies in which we need to, or this is a time when we need to take responsibility for ourselves. This is what humanity is meant to be doing in this period. We're moving away from the patriarchal, do what you're told approach to people thinking for themselves, they're taking responsibility for themselves, for their learning, for their choices, and for the direction that we are taking individually and en masse as the human family. So we have a big conflict going on at the moment as we are living through this transition from the old age to the new age, and the old ways to the new ways, and the old energies to the new energies. And this can be pretty bloody uncomfortable to live through. As, I think we're all seeing. It's not pretty at the moment. There's so much conflict. You watch the news and you just can't tell what's true anymore. You can really see, and I don't know about you, I can just feel it. There is a battle going on. And it's really uncomfortable for us to live through. This destruction, however, is a necessary part of creation. The old forms that are now limitations for us need to be destroyed to make way for the new. Otherwise we're back to polishing the turds, right? Which is what we see so much of in the world right now. We're just, that saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Well, that's what it feels like for me at the moment. You look at governments and politics, and anytime some fresh person comes along with new ideas and fresh ideas that can really move us forward and change the world, they just get squashed by the vested interests, They don't get a chance to see the light of day. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now like that. There's a lot of censorship. Things are just being taken out of the public domain so that we can't even find proof of things anymore. And, there's a lot of dodgy stuff going on. And this is a result of these clashing world energies. But the good news is that in the long run, these incoming Aquarian energies are on our side because the Aquarian influence is getting stronger and stronger, and the Piscean influence is fading. Okay, but it's really uncomfortable because the old energies are fading and the new ones aren't yet established, right? So it's, we feel the discomfort. It's not pretty. But these incoming energies are definitely conditioning the next couple thousand years with the energies of the Aquarian age, which are teamwork and sharing and recognizing our interconnectedness, okay? So we need to get the dinosaurs out of the way, the people who are pretty much representing the status quo and what we're living with now, and truly reflect the growing will of the people for a more compassionate and meaningful society that supports us both as individuals and collectively, as the human family, as the human family who is responsible for uplifting the lower kingdoms. We need to bring in these values that humanity is really crying out for now, and we're just not seeing represented outwardly yet in our lives. We're all demanding it like hell on the inner planes, but we're not seeing it reflected yet outwardly, or at least not much. There are glimpses of it here and there, like the ones I've been talking about, the interesting things. There are certainly good things that are happening in the world, but it could be so much better. It could be like a zillion times better. And we're going to get there. The question is, are we going to facilitate it ourselves and speed it up through our conscious activity? Or are we just going to carry on unconsciously, creating our crappy thoughts, creating the crappy circumstances that we live through, and just letting the slow grinding process of evolution take its course? Because it'll get there in the end, but we can stimulate it ourselves. We can choose to make it happen in a more rapid fashion. So let's get on to some practical stuff. We've hinted at what that is, but let's try and spell it out a bit more. One thing we need to do is to shine a light at what is going on betwixt our ears. We need to become aware of the thoughts and emotions that we are energizing, that we are literally giving life to make sure that we are not contributing to the general psychic pollution of the world. Most of it is created unconsciously by humanity. We need to make these things conscious to our own minds. Because if we can't see them, we don't know what's going on, then we can't do anything about it. We need to envision what we want in this world. Rather than constantly focusing and nourishing the fear and the worries and all of the crap we see everywhere around us, we need to think beautiful, expansive, and supportive thoughts. That continuum we were talking about of spirit and matter. Well, we need to spiritualize our thought energy. We don't want to just leave it anymore at the lower levels. This may sound so airy-fairy and ephemeral that we are affecting world affairs via our thoughts. But remember, energy follows thoughts. This is a spiritual law. And if the combined thoughts of humanity have the power to create plagues and natural disasters, then we can also use the combined thought of humanity constructively to create a more beautiful world of cooperation and sharing. Oh, that sounds so nice. That's what I want. So, the Tibetan, speaking about all of the old, selfish, outmoded thought forms that we harbor, said, "Will we vitalize them or will we arrest them?" And he tells us that we can arrest them by a rush and wave of love for the party implicated that envelops the thought form and sends it back to the originator, borne on the wings of a surge of astral plane matter, strong enough to sweep through and around, mayhap disintegrating, but most certainly returning it harmlessly to the sender. Devitalize it by love, break it in pieces by the power of a counter thought form of peace and harmony. So there's an interesting word in there. Thought form. We're back to our continuum again. This continuum, honestly, it just kind of encompasses everything. I mean, it's got to, right? Spirit all the way down to matter. There is nothing else. So the thought forms are forms that are made of mental energy. And there are also astral forms, like emotional thought forms, that are made from astral or emotional energy. When we talk about the astral plane, we're talking about all things emotional. So when we nourish a thought, we are actually creating a thing. You know, this thought form is a thing. You've probably heard that phrase, thoughts are things. Well, this is what it means. These thoughts that we nourish over and over again, that we feed and we obsess upon, they become thought forms. So they have substance to them. They're not as dense as, say, a table, and they're not as high as spirit, but they are made of subtle energy, and they are a thing. And so we need to be careful about the thought forms that we're creating. And I really love this idea of the Tibetans, that we can break apart the negative thought forms, emotional and mental, that exist out there, and we can devitalize them and break them apart by the power of a counter thought form of peace and harmony. Now, this is easier said than done. Just yesterday, after making my notes for this podcast, I encountered this problem myself. A bunch of stuff happened, and it just chucked me instantly into a low mood. I remembered what I had just been writing about and thought about the irony of it, that I had just been writing about all this shit and then found myself succumbing. But that's life, And then I made myself redirect my thoughts. And I didn't even want to do it, but I made myself do it. And that's what we got to do, because, often when we're in these low moods and we're nourishing these negative thought forms, we don't want to pull ourselves out of it. It's difficult to pull ourselves out of it, but it's what we need to do. We need to keep our personal vibration as high as possible. And we need to catch ourselves when we're feeling fear or hatred or blame or bitterness or resentment or whatever it is. And we need to catch ourselves in that moment. And we have to choose to let it go and to replace it with a higher, more edifying thought form. Remember, we are talking about spiritualizing our thought. And we need to go from our thought form creation being unconscious to conscious. And that means that we make the choice again and again and again to think edifying thoughts, things that are good for the whole. That's whole with a WH, by the way. It's got to be our personal choice that we mindfully make again and again. Okay? Otherwise, we're operating pretty much like an animal operates. We've got to make our thought processes conscious. Catch ourselves when we're down, because it's definitely going to happen. We're not just going to be Pollyanna happy all the time. There will be difficult times. Shit's going to happen. You're going to plunge. But make the choice to let the crap go and to create a loving vibe within yourself and to pump the positive vibe out into the atmosphere rather than the negative psychic pollution. I've got a nice quotation that I want to mention here. This is by Helena Roerich. She said, "If thought in itself contains creative energy, then how useful is it to direct good thought into space?" Now, after all we've been talking about, I hope that sounds reasonable to you. I hope it doesn't sound so airy-fairy and tutti-frutti. So we do that if we are spiritualizing thought energy, and we make sure that as many of our thoughts and emotions as possible are consciously directed toward positive outcomes and the good of the whole, then we will not be contributing to the psychic pollution in the world. And like the Tibetan says, we will be able to smash apart, to break in pieces those countering dark thought forms with our own thought forms of peace and love and harmony. Okay, I am going to wrap this up here. I just want to leave you with one more quotation. In The Problems of Humanity, a book by Alice Bailey, the Tibetan tells us that through the new technique of trained, imaginative, creative, and practical goodwill, one person sincerely practicing goodwill in a family can completely change its attitudes. Goodwill, really practiced among groups in any nation, by political and religious parties in any nation, and among the nations of the world, can revolutionize the world. So let's choose to release the fear, and let's choose to nourish what we really do value and what we want to see. Let's choose to nourish peace, compassion, inclusiveness, harmlessness, selflessness, love, and harmony in our own minds, so that we can reflect this out into the world. Because Gandhi wasn't shitting us when he said, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. Okay, so this week I am going to tell you about 2 free resources that relate to all that we've been discussing today and that can help you to turn your thoughts around. First, I recommend that you download my free quick start guide to doable meditation. In this guide, I provide really simple, no fuss instructions on how to meditate. And I'm talking meditation that only takes 5 minutes. 5 minutes, 5 little minutes. It also includes tips to make sure you can fit it into your day and to help you move past any resistance you might feel about starting a daily meditation practice. Now, meditation is the number one way to get a grip on your mind and on your emotions. Okay, so I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Otherwise, you can get it at theinspirationcloud.com/SYO25, and those are the numbers 25. Now, the second offering I have for you is my free Visualization Essentials Guide that you can download to easily get started on creating the things that you want to see, not just in your life, but in the world, okay? Because as we spoke about, anything that manifests in the physical plane is first thought of in the mind and visualized and turned around in the imagination, So this gives you everything you need to know about how to get started visualizing and to turn those thought forms around and to create what you want to see in the world. Okay? Gandhi will thank you. As well, you might want to check out episode 5 of the podcast, How to Program Your Mind, where I talk all about visualization as the creative force of the universe and how to do it yourself. Okay, that is theinspirationcloud.com/SYO5. And also check out episodes 3 and 22, where I talk all about meditation and its powers to help you master your mind and your emotions and to consciously choose your thoughts, because it's a discipline. It takes practice, and meditation is the thing that's going to help you do it better than anything else. Okay? So you'll find links to all of those in the show notes, as well as all of the resources I talked about today, the various books. So if you are really loving all of the things I'm talking about in these podcasts and you want to know more and you want to learn about all of the practices that can take you further on your spiritual path and amplify your well-being and your positive impact in the world, you could sign up to the wait list for my upcoming Inner Circle membership experience. If you want to do that, go on over to theinspirationcloud.com/membership to get on the wait list, and I will keep you in the loop. Okay, my friend, that's all for today. Thanks so much for spending your time with me. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you'll join me next week, as I'm going to be discussing more ways that we can clean up our psychic pollution and protect ourselves from negative people and forces. And I don't know about you, but I'm needing to do a lot of work on that myself these days. I just have to look at bloody Yahoo or the news and my feathers get ruffled instantly. It's just like a constant effort to keep myself grounded and sane. You know, it's a lot harder these days than it used to be. So I'm going to be talking about that next week, how we can clean up our psychic pollution and protect ourselves from negative people and forces. Take care. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I really hope you found it helpful and full of uplifting ideas that you can put into practice in your life. And if you have, chances are your friends and family will too. So please share it with them on social media. You'll be helping them to sort themselves out, because I bet you think they need it, right? But seriously, you'll also be doing me a huge favor, and I will be eternally grateful for your generosity. It would also be lovely if you would leave me a review on iTunes, preferably a nice one, please. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast while you're there. If you have any questions or would like me to address a certain topic, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at info@theinspirationcloud.com. Have a good one, folks. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.